Charles, what are you doing here?
This is Bill. Aren't you supposed to be in Congress?
I'm sending work-related emails.
Is that James Comer? Looks like more evidence. You'd better preserve that. What are you doing?
You've got mail.
Now, Hillary Clinton's supposed to show up tomorrow. We'll see what happens there.
Is that a congressional subpoena? Don't you have to testify about the Epstein files?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh no, Mrs. Bill!
Charles, that was essentially the Terminator 2 of clay puppet animations, 8 years in the making. How are you?
Well, that's great. I didn't get any sound though.
Oh, you didn't?
No.
Huh. Oh, that's because it was coming from, okay, I know why, but the audience did get sound.
Okay.
Sorry about that, Charles. I could have played it in another way that you would have got. See, everything technical, it's so complicated, but basically you were back at the Chappaqua Data Center. I don't think you would really be able to enjoy it on the tiny phone screen anyway, so I'll release that later tonight on X, of course. But Hillary Clinton needing to appear before Congress, I was really burning the AI midnight oil to get that thing done in time for today's show, because there are indicators, perhaps, you know, the congressional testimony that's forthcoming and this disaster at the Munich conference, that perhaps finally, after decades, Charles, maybe the dummy Democrats are ready to give the Clintons the old heave-ho.
Let's hope. Let's hope. That's. I mean, you couldn't tell, I suppose, but I was laughing just without the sound. That was hilarious. But did you get approval from my agent to use me?
Well, you know, it's very interesting because I was watching you here on the monitor and I could see at first you were like, oh, Jason's running this animation again. Then you were like, wait a minute, something looks a little different about it. And then you started to notice that it was a completely new iteration. So I'm so disappointed that you didn't have sound. I wanted to surprise you with that, but that's okay. I'll send it to you later.
That's fantastic, Jason. Fantastic. So in this free broadcast, I think we really need to hammer a few things, a few very important things. So everything about I would argue, the period from 1972 forward in American politics is just pure theater, right? The decision to remove Nixon is not what we have been sold by Woodward and Bernstein. It is not what happened. The way it happened, it was a plot, and it was, I think, maybe after Kennedy. So it's the second time an American president. In the case of Nixon's victory in '72 was astounding in terms of the electoral college votes and what he actually got. I mean, he certainly had a popular mandate in 1972, yet he was forced out by '74. In the case of what's going on now with Epstein, it's important. It's a long time ago, but it just happens that the key events in Epstein's early life occurred just as I was going through high school as I was in college. And I have a vivid memory of my college experience and my Harvard Business School experience. So in 1976, Epstein got his first job at Bear Stearns, okay? In 1975, Gerald Ford said to New York, drop dead. New York, flirted with bankruptcy. Felix Royton, the famous Lazard banker, and others pulled off a rescue, an unusual rescue that didn't involve bankruptcy. But New York City, I mean, literally down in the area that you and I walked there on Water Street, those buildings were just being put up. There were like tumbleweeds down there. It was, it was a disaster zone. So the notion that a guy who happened to have some connection to Dalton, we don't really understand what he was actually doing at Dalton. Students who were at Dalton then, and I know some, could probably get the yearbook. I have every yearbook of my high school days. So there's yearbooks, there are newspapers, a student newspaper at Dalton. You could figure out what Jeffrey Epstein was being called if he had a connection to Dalton. And my suspicion is he was just a tutor. He was somebody who was on the roster of people. If little Johnny was, not doing well in math, you could hire Jeffrey Epstein on the side, and Epstein would help you with homework. That's my suspicion. I don't think he was actually on the faculty, but there's a simple way to tell. Every yearbook has a list of all, at least the Horace Mann yearbooks have a list of each teacher. So how was he shown in that yearbook? And that's something you wouldn't be able to go into the Dalton Library, but if people really were serious about investigating Jeffrey Epstein, Congress could go there. DOJ, FBI could go there. So what was his actual role there? The notion that he got a serious role at Bear Stearns, doing anything other than, back in the day, Xeroxing things, getting coffee for people with no college degree, and no real bona fides at all after high school, is laughable, is absolutely laughable. And the notion back in the 70s, nobody made all that much money in the late 70s, 75 through 80. It was a rough period. I remember Nick Brady and his acolyte, Pat Durkin, great people. I was a little associate, and they would regale us with stories about what it was like in that time frame. They would get to the office at 9:30, have a cup of coffee, go to the there wasn't a women's room, the men's room, and with the Wall Street Journal, the Economist, or whatever, sit on the seat there, do their business, spend an hour, in the bathroom, and then go out and play squash, then have lunch at the racket club. I mean, there's nothing to do. There's no business per se, and firms were downsizing and going out of business. This was also in the era where the brokerage commissions, which had been fixed, were at high levels. That all changed, and the way stocks were trading, the commission structure went down. So inflation was raging. There wasn't that much business. Let's say Jeffrey Epstein, because he was, tutoring Ace Greenberg, the CEO of Bear Stearns, let's say he got some kind of sinecure. This wasn't during a period where you could make a tremendous amount of money. That period occurred after he was fired in 1981. So the origin story of this guy is just absurd. It's absolutely absurd. And you marry that up with the fact that they're, the firms on the street, the big traders, they knew all the other big traders. I mean, Stevie Cohen, as an example, who had to pay, I think, nearly $1 billion fine for improper trading. At his peak, and I don't know what he's doing now, at his peak, he was responsible for 10% of the trading volume, approximately, on the NASDAQ. 10%. That's a big gun. A guy like, if you hadn't heard of Epstein and he claimed that he made all his money trading, this is just fiction. This is fiction made up by people who are trying to launder money. So then we get to this question of the Epstein and Wexner connection. Now, people are not focused enough on what was really going on at Limited Brands, and specifically with Victoria's Secret. The story is, the fable is that Les Wexner, whose family ran department stores and had real estate holdings in and around Columbus, Ohio, and in Ohio in the beginning, found himself, this is the official story, found himself in San Francisco where he noticed a lingerie shop and said, I could buy that, and I'll turn this into a real business. Now, what was Les Wexner doing in San Francisco, scouting lingerie?
For
right?
himself.
That's a little bit unusual, right? So I don't know, I don't know how old he was when he actually got married. I don't know how he met Epstein. I don't know if he's straight, bisexual, gay. I don't know. But one thing I do know is that Victoria's Secret, whoever came up with this idea, and maybe it was Wexner with Epstein, they decided to have a fashion show. And I just know, I never went to I think you went to the fashion show, Jason, didn't you?
I did. One year when I was in LA, I was sitting at breakfast in a hotel and this guy struck up a conversation. He seemed gay, invited me to the fashion show.
Yeah,
and
that's normal. Yeah, but the point is that, like rock concerts, like other sporting events and stuff like that, that fashion show evolved into something where people who wanted to sleep with the models.
Everybody was there, Charles. Every celebrity was there. I had the crappiest seat in the house, but I mean, every person you could name was there.
And so, like the Clinton Global Initiative, remember Epstein takes credit for the Clinton, or Dershowitz, in the letter with Lefcourt takes credit, or gives Epstein credit for conceiving of the Clinton Global Initiative and for juicing the HIV/AIDS effort, and we'll get to that. That got into higher gear by September of 2002. The Clinton Global Initiative and the Victoria's Secret fashion shoot are closed events, meaning that Bill Clinton or his team decides who gets into the CGI and who gets seated at what table and who goes to what which cocktail party and after party and all that kind of stuff. He controls that, and somebody at Limited controlled who sat in the prime seat, who got to hang out with the models after and before, and those seats had economic value. On the one hand, so people were probably willing to pay to get, the best seats and to get with these models. And beyond that, where the genius, the criminal genius part goes, if those people who were attending that fashion shoot were married or otherwise affiliated and decided to do the nasty with one or more models, having pictures of that would be enormously valuable. So to me, I've always thought that Epstein was in the blackmail business. This is common, actually, on Wall Street. I'm aware, and I'm not going to name the firm. I'm aware of another firm, and it was not Dillon Reed, where a partner bragged to me that his way he cultivated business with getting these big name companies for a relatively small firm is he would wine and dine the CEO, introduce women into the equation, and he had a client for life. He bragged to me about this. So it's not as if Epstein, and that was in the early 80s, before Epstein, when Epstein was in Never Never Land, that vignette that I'm just telling you. And I was in the middle of one of the first $1 billion attempted leverage buyouts in 1983. So I have the check that our firm received, even though the deal didn't happen, for $1.5 million hanging on my wall over there. But anyway, so I think that the real period that we should examine here, if there's going to be an investigation, is 1976 to 1992. Specifically, how year by year, what were Epstein's tax returns? What did he claim he was doing? People, Congress can get all this information, but there is no legitimate avenue from where he was at Dalton or before Dalton to 1992, where he's suddenly meeting Bill Clinton, writing checks to the White House, whatever it's called, Preservation Fund, and eventually then starting in 2002. Now, I said I'd get to 2002. In 2002, now think about this. You're the former president of the United States. You have had to surrender your law licenses under threat of criminal indictment in January 19th, 2001. You've been impeached. You're technically bankrupt. The paperwork on your foundation, which was incorporated October 23rd, 1997, is laughably defective. They've never used the proper legal name. They've never filled out all their paperwork. In times while he was president, because he assumed Al Gore would succeed him, and nothing would ever be uncovered. At times while he was president, the foundation didn't have even 3 trustees, the minimum number required. We could talk for days about all the defects, right?
Maybe
so you
10
say, all right,
years.
right? We've been doing so actually, yeah. But it'll be 10 years in June. in fact. But in 2002, of all people in the world, how did Bill Clinton decide to avail himself of the use of Epstein's jet to go across Africa? Why did he pick actors, Kevin Spacey and others, to join him? If this was a serious effort to fight, quote, AIDS. And this is before, again, another 10 years could be spent, talking about the very mission was just ridiculous, right? The person he decided to give the priority to organizing this thing was Ira Magaziner. Until very recently, I'd forgotten that your friend, and I'm joking here, Royce Lamberth, issued a scathing denunciation of Ira Magaziner for being basically a congenital liar under oath. Because the issue was the healthcare task force, which he ran with Hillary Clinton, another congenital liar, conducted all of its hearings in secret. Initially, they claimed that that was fine because everybody involved was a government employee. But it turned out that it was 500 people, and an overwhelming majority were not government employees, and all of them stood to benefit from whatever Hillary dreamt up with her crazed healthcare reform program. So Royce Lamberth issues a scathing denunciation in a lawsuit. It was some physicians group or doctors group suing, and I forget who was ordered to pay several $100,000 in legal fees. And the matter was referred for criminal consideration to who? To Eric freaking Holder. And Eric Holder decides late in '99 that there's no there there. He decides not to prosecute it, and then I would argue a crooked court comes back and says, the decision was wrong. The government employees were entitled to mount an aggressive defense, and while their defense was very aggressive, it wasn't inaccurate. So they overturned the Lamberth ruling in 1999. Why in God's green earth would you select Ira Magaziner with that record? And you've had to surrender your law license. So, if in a real discussion with a former head of state, even if they love Bill Clinton, you'd have to say, look, Bertie Ahern in Ireland, you want to sign this letter of intent with us, this memorandum of association for Ireland to give this entity, which by the way doesn't exist, 110 million euros if the second part of it is extended. But before we go much further into this, I need to explain that Bill is not an officer or a trustee of this thing. The organization doesn't exist. The Presidential Foundation has no authority to do work outside of a city park in Little Rock. It certainly has no authority to operate a procurement consortium for HIV and AIDS drugs. A procurement consortium for HIV and AIDS drugs, there's an on-point decision, is not a charity because all the drug companies are making money off the operation. It's certainly not a charity. It's a business development exercise. And by the way, Bill can't sign any documents until 2006 because he's had to give up his law license. And the guy who's doing all the intricate details of this procurement consortium is a congenital liar. So there's no real risk in giving us 110 million euros. I mean, this is preposterous on its face. And Epstein is at the center of it? There's in 2002 in the 990, there's no evidence of a non-cash contribution to fund travel. There should be. Right? There's no Clinton entity registered in New York. Right? Even though there's an office in Harlem beginning in August 2001. This is preposterous. And to say that, this international man of mystery, as the New York magazine refers to him, I think in the title of 2002, why would the president of the United States, former president, be intermingling with an international man of mystery? Why would you do that? It's not a good reason. And
the talented Mr. Epstein, you mean?
Yeah, the talented, whatever it is. But I think in the article, it refers to him as an international man of mystery somewhere. I could be wrong.
It is talking about the trip with Kevin Spacey
Right.
on the Boeing 727.
Yeah, this is the first moment that, Epstein was in the real spotlight, as far as I know. And I have a bunch of the Epstein books. I looked through them yesterday after we spoke on the phone, yesterday. And they all are, Bud Light on the early origin period, of Epstein, going from high school, not getting through college, Dalton, Bear Stearns, working for a fraudster, then setting up his own gigantic financial bounty hunting company. I mean, come on. It's just, you may as well say that he was the first, black person to become a Teutonic Knight, a German knight, which is another person associated. I mean, it's a preposterous story. It's like Folieri, with the surplus Vaticans. It's another one of these preposterous stories. And actually, in just breaking news, I can't check it off of X, but there is a report off of X that somebody has found in the file that the list of names, or some memo that says the list of names excludes targets of ongoing investigations.
Yeah, I think they announced that.
Yeah, so, and that does make sense, right? You're not supposed to, ongoing investigations, unresolved investigations are not supposed to be leaked to the press, or to anybody for that matter. So, so getting back now to Clinton, in the last 24 hours, Jen Psaki, who has, famously, tried to protect Obama and the Bidens, the Clintons, et cetera, has come out on, I think, MSNBC, saying that Epstein was involved in a large illegal enterprise. And, we need to get to the bottom of this. Reuters has released a story saying that they have determined, looking at the files, that there is a large illegal enterprise and we need to see, what was really going on here and who's being protected. That is what Hillary Clinton is going to say if she does get out there on 26th and 7th, I think, of February. If Bill and she get in front of Congress, or however they do it, they are going to refuse to answer any questions about them and take up as much time as possible making unfounded Ted Lieu-style allegations against Trump, and they're already calling it the Epstein administration. This is the Epstein administration. That's their approach. And, people in America, some of us have gotten, I think, more educated over the last 10 years, but sad to say, that doesn't make up for the dumbing down of Western civilization, which has occurred at an ever-quickening rate. I mean, think of the number of garbage stories that were accepted as truth back in 2015 and 16 that are all hoaxes. Think of them. We still have people trying to argue that Barack Obama's 8 years in the White House, that was a scandal-free zone. It was a nonstop scandal.
Yeah. Started as a scandal, ended as a scandal. Charles, we've only got about another minute before we make our way over to the First Amendment Forum. There's obviously still a lot more to discuss. People can join us over there on crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com or subscribestar.com or patreon.com/crowdsource the truth. People can also follow me on X at JG_CSTT and subscribe there. These animated Hillary Clinton cartoons aren't going to make themselves, Charles. So it's important that people sponsor the show.
I think they are.
I did use AI extensively to make that, but contrary to what people believe, I didn't just say, make me a cartoon about Hillary Clinton. It was a lot of work, and mostly using AI to create elements that were then used very much in the same way that I've done traditional visual effects in the past. So it's an interesting exercise into some of my, core skills. I was doing clay animation when I was 10 years old. So it was good to come back to that look with much more sophisticated tools. I'll be pleased when you can see the final thing, because the level of sophistication over the totally simple 8 years ago thing is so astounding. I think you'll appreciate the attention to detail in there.
No, I'm sure it's fantastic. I mean, your work is excellent.